Welcome to another episode of Ask the Experts. I'm your co-host, Geoffrey.
And I'm Elizabeth Finlayson. We're from the networking group, TNG, which is Chicago's premier business networking group focused on helping members and making a difference in the communities we serve. Ask the Experts is an effort to share our knowledge with a wider audience.
Welcome to another installment of Ask the Experts. In today's episode, we will be discussing the value of mentoring your machines and caring for your technology. Our guest today is Geoff Horwitz, known as the MacMentor, who helps clients with all things Mac, Apple products, located in Deerfield, Illinois.
Geoff, thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us about your role as chief mentor and the services that you provide, and why Macs and not any other type of office machines or devices?
Absolutely. And hello to you both. It's great to see you. Thanks for having me. I'll start with the evolution of the MacMentor because that'll explain, I think, a lot of things. I came out of corporate in 2009, and I had a overwhelming desire to always work at Apple. However, my technical skills were not Unix or Mac-based or even iOS-based, the phones and the iPads. And so my goal or dream of working in Cupertino and meeting Steve Jobs never came to fruition, but I did start working at the Apple stores. And my eventual goal from that was to make my way to Cupertino. But instead, it took me on a different path. I did a lot of things at the stores, and I worked with a lot of people at the stores. And in doing so, I had a lot of clients at the stores asking if I did service at home or in the office. And it's not something that Apple allows for their employees. So of course I wasn't doing it or couldn't do it. But after a few months, I started taking people's names and I started to think, well, what if I do that? What if I start my own business? And the real push for it came, and this is a kind of funny story. One Sunday morning, a client and friend was sitting at the Genius Bar. And I went over and I was talking to him. And he's like, Geoff, what are you doing here? And I kind of chuckled. And I'm like, oh, I love it here. It's great. I get to meet a lot of people. Love the Apple store. He's like, no, really, what are you doing here? And when I sat and thought about it, I'm like, I didn't have a great answer for him. And he said to me, my company is moving from Windows machines to Macs, and my IT guy doesn't know a lick about Macs. Come and do it for me. And I looked at him and I'm like, oh, well, I can't. You know, I work here and we're not allowed to. And he goes, what if I offer you X? And the sum of money just kind of blew me away. You know, at the stores, I was making $22 or $23 an hour, and I was being offered over $100 an hour to do work that I loved. And it didn't take me long to agree to that and then figure out the next step, which was starting the MacMentor. So that's why I, work mainly with Apple products as opposed to PCs. And there's, a million different brands of PCs. But another reason is, people don't do a whole lot with their PC. They don't make movies. They don't do a lot with pictures. And if they're really, motivated and musical, there's no real easy software on a PC. Whereas on the Mac, you have this great tool called GarageBand, which also exists on the iPhone and the iPad. And so that is the real reason that I play in the Apple world versus the PC world.
Are there things that you do for your clients that are above and beyond what maybe you can get from, let's say, a traditional storefront or other, because there's other service providers besides Apple that are out there that service, machines. And, what is it about the mentorship that gives it that special relationship?
So great question. And I'm going to fall back to my previous life as a kid. My father owned a pharmacy, and as a kid, I worked with him. And I saw how he was with people. He was fantastic. And his place was in Chicago, and it didn't matter if the person spoke Polish or Spanish or, was white, black, any color. He treated everybody the same way with a respect, and he helped them. As much as I didn't want to admit it early in life, that really affected me, and in a good way. And so for me, providing one-to-one service, you can get some of that at the Apple store, but let's be honest, right? You might get a specialist at the store who is new, not well trained in everything, or is having a bad day and just don't really want to help you, or they help you for 5 minutes and they move on to the next person. If Elizabeth calls me and says, Geoff, I want a Mac, I'm going to talk with Elizabeth and we're going to decide, well, do you buy a MacBook Air, a MacBook Pro, an iMac desktop, and I'll get exactly the configuration she needs. And I do purchasing, I do delivery and setup. So it's really full circle, as opposed to going to the store, buying something, and you could sit at the store and have something set up. But let's be honest, the personal touch, unless you're the only person in the store, the person who's helping you, they're going to be on to the next person in 5, maybe 10 minutes. Not me, right? I'm going to sit with you and not just while we set it up. Then I'm going to help you figure out how to best use it in your life, whether it's your personal life, your business life, both, how to integrate it with your phone or integrate it with, your iPad, so that you're fully functional, regardless of whether you're in your house, in your office, sitting outside at a Starbucks or at some coffee shop. So it's very different than just walking into, and that store could be Best Buy, it could be, Apt. My service is very, very personal and very friendly. So
That's great. So COVID has obviously impacted a lot of organizations. Some of them are they have to be remote. Workers are remote, and you can't put on the hazmat suit and go to every single person in the company. How does it change what you do? And have you come up with different ways to pivot so that you can extend the value that you provide to folks that are remote too?
Yeah, and honestly, it was that was very challenging back in March and April for a lot of reasons. As COVID began, the last thing that people wanted to do, at least at first, was deal with their devices. They had to deal with kids coming home from school and e-learning and things like that. Once that all kind of leveled out by mid-May, I was crazy busy. And, to your question, Geoff, I had figured out that I could do Zoom workshops, right? Where I used to do workshops in locations like golf courses or libraries. Now I could do it in front of X number of people, and I didn't have to travel and they didn't have to travel. So that was one of the additions I had to my offerings in April, May, and June. And then as I started to go back out into the field, which was very scary for me because I have clients in the city, and some of my clients in the city are in high rises. And the first time I went into the city, I actually told the client I didn't want to come. I have a client in the Park Hyatt building, and I'm like, I don't want to go into a lobby. I don't know how many people are going to be there. And then I've got to take an elevator up and down. I'm like, don't want to do it. Well, she guaranteed me that I would be the only person in the lobby, and that someone would walk or rather ride with me up to her floor in a hazmat suit, basically. And they would touch the buttons, and I had to have my temperature checked and answer questions. So I was leery about it, but I went, and when I did, it was exactly as she said. And I actually felt safer than previously, before COVID. But it's been really good to be able to offer, and I've gotten clients from all over the country by offering these services on the likes of Facebook or LinkedIn. I was working with some senators in Pennsylvania, which kind of cracked me up. I had this woman called me out of nowhere, and I'm like, how did you find me? Oh, I saw your post, or somebody shared your post. But not just Zoom, which has been helpful. Also doing screen sharing. The Mac has built-in screen sharing, so my clients don't have to install any third-party software, which is really nice because you never know what comes along with third-party software. So that's a nice Mac feature. So yeah, so I've had to adjust a little bit, not a whole lot, and then once people started to see that this was not going away anytime soon, well, my home Wi-Fi sucks. My machines are old. They're slow. Oh my God. Well, from mid-May, actually, it's still going. I have moved more product. Like I should be getting bonuses from Apple for all the products that I've moved for them in the last 2 quarters.
That could be an interesting revenue stream for you too, probably, and maybe put you into the spokesman category.
I do purchasing for my clients, but I don't make money there, right? So if a product lists for $1,019, or that's the cost, I do get a discount, which is nice, and I pass that along to my clients, but I don't make any money on the products. My money is all made on my services.
A lot of folks have been revamping their home office now that they're at home, and like you mentioned, Wi-Fi and things like that, and they're trying to deal with online meetings. So what do you think are 3 things that they should consider when they're creating or improving their home office when it comes to technology?
Great question, Elizabeth. And first and foremost, you have to know how much bandwidth is coming into your house and how much you're paying for. Because sometimes the amount that you're paying for is not what you're receiving. So it's very important to know how much you're paying for, how much you're receiving, and then what's the maximum that you can get at your location. Because you may be paying for 50 or 75 megabytes per second, but you could get up to 300 megasecond. And the difference there is if you've got 2 adults, multiple kids at home, the parents are working, the kids are doing e-learning, you want to have as much bandwidth as possible, which then leads me to my next point, which is don't stay with the modem that you get from either Comcast or AT&T, right? Those modems are built to do a lot of things, but they are not built to do a lot of things well. So get the internet into those machines, but then get a separate router to provide you Wi-Fi. Not only is it better and faster, it can also be safer depending on the unit that you're working with.
That's a great point. I have heard where some of these units remotely modified in terms of their governors in order to restrict bandwidth. Not that that would happen, of course, but the opportunity exists.
And then finally, along those lines, if you have a 4 or 5 year old modem at your house, or if you have a modem from Comcast or AT&T and you don't know how old it is, call them up and find out. And if there's a newer one from your carrier, have them send it to you, or have them bring somebody out and set it up for you. You always want to have the latest in terms of modems that your provider offers.
Maybe you can share some of the ways that you've helped people in communities with technology and leveraging some of your background and skills.
When I started the MacMentor, a very dear friend of mine said, you really need to go to the Northbrook Chamber. And I'm like, what the heck do I need to do that for? And he says, trust me, small business, that's a great chamber, and you'll meet a lot of people, and you'll just trust me on this. And so I did. I went. And it was one of the best things I ever did for a lot of reasons, right? I came out of corporate, and in corporate, I was working with CIOs, chief executives, building systems for their businesses. But as a sole proprietor, it's a totally different set of people that I'm working with, right? I'm not working with CIOs and CEOs anymore. I'm working with moms, dads, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small businesses. And so learning how to manage that was something I didn't know I had to do. And joining the Northbrook Chamber was one of the best things I did. Following that, I went to the Deerfield, Bannockburn, Riverwoods Chamber. One of the reasons I did that is because at the time I lived in Deerfield, and I now live in Riverwoods. But I joined the board of directors at the DBR Chamber so I could have more of an impact on what goes on there and help shape the chamber, how it operates, things that they do. And I've met some fantastic people. I've joined other networking groups like TNG, which is just a fantastic group in and of itself. And, I've learned so much from these different groups that I've also started a couple of my own networking groups. And, the goal there is to help people network, because that's a challenging thing, right? And it's a hard thing for people. And if you can navigate the chambers and navigate other, networking groups successfully, you can really help yourself, help your business. And one thing that I would love to get across to whoever is watching this is you got to give. And you've probably heard it, right? You got to give to live. It's not BS. The more you give, right, of yourself, of your time, whatever it may be, things just trickle back to you. Sometimes they trickle back really fast, and sometimes it takes a little longer. But giving, there's nothing like it. And so, along those lines, myself and a couple of guys that I became friends with from the Northbrook Chamber, we started our own charity called the North Shore Helpers. And that has been one of the most gratifying things that I've done in my life, short of having kids. Every year we have been gathering items, hats, clothes, food, and we've been bringing them to a shelter in Inglewood in Chicago called Primo Center. And this is a home for women and children who are just in need. And it's amazing. The center itself allows women to stay there from 3 to 6 months. And some of these women are young with 4 or 5 kids, and they have nothing. And so our goal initially was to bring them a little holiday cheer, right? So we would gather items, things that the center told us the people were looking for. And we would go, we go down, we have a party, a Christmas party, we bring Santa, and to see these kids' faces, and what's best about it is that we're Caucasians going into a completely African-American Black center. And so it's great for us to be able to do that, to show these kids that, you know what, we're here to help. And maybe they'll see that white people aren't so bad. And for whatever reason, maybe they think that, maybe they just don't know, but it's just, we have, and personally, it is, I get so much pleasure out of going down and being able to help people. And so that's me.
That's so beautiful. And we were talking earlier about, changes that we've been experiencing through COVID and the way people are adjusting. And so this might be a tricky question, but what do you see on the horizon for the Mac community and changes in technology in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, there's a lot of really cool things coming out of Apple. That's another reason that I love it in this little playground. Right now, like for instance, the desktop computers, they're about to get a massive overhaul. And all of Apple's computers, the whole Mac line, is getting a brand new operating system, actually in a couple weeks, for the first time built around what's called Apple Silicon, right? Apple is making their own chips for the computers where they previously were relying on Intel. And so that's just awesome for me because people are going to be upgrading their machines. They're going to need to know how to use the software. One of the benefits of the MacMentor is I'm a developer in Apple's world. So I get access to, it's called beta software or not public software, and I get to try it and play with it. And so that's fantastic. So by the time it comes out, I can say, hey, Elizabeth, don't upgrade to the new operating system for this amount of time because there's this quirk or that bug or what have you. And so I'll push that information out to my clients, and they're very grateful, rather than uploading or updating their software, they wait because they know that I've done it. And it's, when I tell them it's okay, it's like gold. So, but there's also talk of, glasses coming out. I don't know much about them. But every year there's a new phone, there's new iPads, new products. And so it's like an endless stream of things for me to do. And people are always updating. And so as a result, there's always need for the MacMentor.
It'd be interesting to see if there's any way to funnel some of the old equipment into some of the communities where you're doing some of these services too. And maybe you're already doing that.
Well, typically when I replace a client's computer, it's because it's so old that it's almost not usable. One of the challenges with computers, Geoff, is that they need to be updated regularly. And the reason is you want to make sure you have the latest security enhancements, bug fixes, so that you have as little chance as possible to be hacked. And one of the beauties of the Mac is that it has antivirus software built into the operating system, right? So that you don't have to go out and buy a third-party antivirus software, but you do need to keep the software updated in order to completely protect yourself. So,
Good to know. Good to know. And I think security is becoming more and more important.
that's
great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Geoff, it's been great talking to you. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can reach you?
So my email is my first name, Geoff, at TheMacMentor.com. So Geoff at TheMacMentor.com. Or you can reach me either voice call or text at 847-902-6681.
Geoff, this has been so enjoyable. I can just hear how much you love your work and, helping people as well as working with all these devices. I could just kind of light up with joy. I found the information and guidance really helpful. We just greatly appreciate your expertise, and I know that our listeners will find it equally useful.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Ask the Experts.
I'm your co-host, Geoffrey Walk.
And I'm Elizabeth Finlayson.
Don't forget to send us your questions, suggestions, or ideas. As always, you can reach us at asktheexperts@gmail.com.
Have a productive week.